I want to speak about the this week's parasha is Parashas Yisro, and we have the Luchos, the Aseres HaDibros, in this week's parasha. So, first I want to clear up a couple of misconceptions about the Luchos that are out there. There's a comedian, his name is Mel Brooks. He had a movie where he had a depiction of Moses coming down from the mountain, and he says God tells him to give God tells him to give this to the Jews, and he comes down with 3 tablets, and he says, "These are your 15," and then one drops and breaks, and he goes, 10 commandments. So that's a big misconception. But there are other misconceptions. Even the name, the 10 Commandments, is not a Yiddish name. That's not that name that's out there is not really a term used by Jewish literature. Not by. It's nowhere in the Gemara. It's the Torah actually calls it Aseres HaDvarim. Later in Parshas Kisisa, it's Aseres HaDibros. We know that Aseres HaDibros. What's the difference between Aseres HaDibros and 10 Commandments? 10 Commandments means 10 mitzvahs. Aseres HaDibros comes from the Shorish Daled Beis Reish, which means memras, spoken. And if you look at the psukim, it's sometimes not that easy to even count the mitzvahs in the psukim. It seems like some might have more. Where we stop the Aseres HaDibros is a lot of machlekes rishonim, but it's really more 10 dibros, which could have been 10 mitzvahs or more. But that concept is not a Jewish concept. Another thing that's interesting is also the shape. Like we have over here. You see the top is round. It's not so simple that the top was round. The Chazal, Gemara Bava Basra says that they were square at the top. There could be other sources that may allude to the fact that it was round, but most of the traditional mainstream sources seem to say that it was square at the top. In fact, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was famous for opposing round luchos. He really didn't like it. He was very opposed to people who would use it in stationery or something like that. He wanted it to be square. The Stipler was very against the rounded luchos. And it's just interesting as you go around. I'm sure people who travel and have been to places, you'll see luchos all over the world. There are articles and there are in journals that try to trace the history of where this came from, where the round came from. Apparently, I don't know, early England, that was the style of writing, meaning in each generation, what they would think of someone writing on a scroll or chiseling on a tablet, if they would use that format. So there's a Michelangelo painting that uses rounded luchos, so that's just another misconception. But I just want to talk a little bit about the litigation surrounding the 10 Commandments. There is lawyers they don't use Google to check cases. They use something called LexisNexis, which is like a research engine that has every case that was ever brought in the history of, the law. And for fun, I put in the search box 10 Commandments, and I came up with 1,056 cases that mentioned it or were regarding it. Now, in American law, the 10 Commandments is a very hot topic. There are hundreds of cases that are brought about the 10 Commandments, mainly whether or not cities or counties or courts or museums or schools can have monuments of the 10 Commandments on their premises. A lot of these lawsuits are about that. So, in Utah, New Mexico, Kentucky, Texas, all these states, and we're talking about serious lawsuits, not just knickknacks. These are federal cases in federal court. And 2 cases actually went up straight to not straight, but through the process, which it means they went to the Supreme Court of the United States, which means they were on a lower level decided, then they appealed, and then they appealed that all the way to the Supreme Court. And they always try to get these cases in front of the Supreme Court. So in June of 2005, the Supreme Court issued judgments on 2 Ten Commandment cases. And in one case they said, which was a Texas case, they said, the name of the case was Van Orden versus Perry. That's Rick Perry, that person you sue the governor when you sue in the state. That case was about near the Texas state capitol. There was a big monument that said the whole 10 Commandments on it, and This guy didn't like it. He felt that it was too religious for him, and he felt that the state of Texas shouldn't be allowed to put such a religious symbol on its premises. So he sued, and that went to the Supreme Court. And then on the same day, they had another ruling about a case in Kentucky where in the courthouse there were displays of the Ten Commandments all over the courthouse. And the Supreme Court said, Texas, it's okay. Kentucky, it's not okay.
Wow.
Right? So, is it a stira of the Supreme Court? Avada not. The teretz is you have to know the details of the case. The facts always drive the case, and you always have to, just like lahavdil in learning, if you have a stira in Rambam, you have to go in each sugya and see what's going on. And I don't think it was a coincidence that they issued the two rulings in the same day, because they wanted to show that it's not necessarily always the same din. Let me give you a little background into what these cases would be about. Like what would be the chakira or the shaila of the case. Many people have heard of the First Amendment. Usually it's your free speech, First Amendment. That's a big hot topic. Free speech, First Amendment, these type of things. Freedom of the press. The other thing in the First Amendment is freedom of religion. Now, in that First Amendment, the actual language of the amendment, the nusach, is that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So they can't make an establishment, can't pass a law that would make an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's the law. So basically, they can't, let's say, they can't give, on an extreme example, they can't give money to one religion and say, or make a law that you have to observe one religion. But they also are saying that we can't prevent people from practicing religion. The problem is that this law is innately stira, because what it means is that they cannot promote religion, but sometimes when they don't promote religion, they also hurt religious people. So let's say the Ten Commandments is a perfect example. They can't put in the government property 10 Commandments, promote religion. But what if religious people like the 10 Commandments? And that's their free exercise. They want to keep the religious symbols there. So there's always this tension that they're trying to find that balance between staying off religion, but also not hurting religious people. These are the basis of all these type of cases. It was Kiryas Yoel was in a big Supreme Court case because they had a town which all the government money was funding Kiryas Yoel kids. Like the public school in Kiryas Yoel, or the infrastructure is all it's a whole Jewish community. They have Jewish police, they have Jewish fire, they have Jewish municipality. So it turned out that all the government money was flowing straight to a religious group. So is that an establishment of religion? But on the other hand, what are they supposed to do? They have to practice their religion. They have free exercise. So that's the tug of war in these cases. So in the Texas case, the court felt that there were other monuments on the property. The monument itself had other symbols on it. It had an American flag. It had some other phrases. So they felt that that symbol wasn't that religious. The language was, it served a secular and historical purpose. The Ten Commandments is historical. It's part of the basis of Western civilization. So it wasn't so religious. Whereas in Kentucky, where it was in the courthouse, it was just, it was solely the Ten Commandments. It was taxpayer funded. It was part of a government building. See, in Texas, it was donated by somebody. And it was on the campus, and you could sort of, and because there were other monuments there, and it wasn't government money, so you could say, maybe it's just a secular historical. But in Kentucky, it was too much. It was government funded, there was no other symbols, so it was too religious. What's ironic is that in the actual Supreme Court building, if you go to these buildings that are in Washington, D.C., it's very fascinating. They all have art and architecture all over them. So in the Supreme Court building, there is what's called a frieze, F-R-I-E-Z-E. It's like an artwork that's like a horizontal band of artwork that surrounds the building. So they have these marble chiseled out figures of history. And one of them is Moses with 2 commandments, chiseled in the Supreme Court. And even in the Supreme Court building, there's paintings, and one of them is of the famous lawgivers of the world, and Moshe Rabbeinu is one of them, Lavdil. So what's really interesting is that I actually looked at this picture, and it's a picture of Moshe, whatever, not a picture of him, but it's supposed to be him, and he's holding it, and his beard is covering So first of all, you only see the second luchais, and his beard covers all the lies. So when it says lo sinif, lo sigzol, it says actually it looks like it says sirtzach, sinaf, sigzol. Like you should do all these things. You can't see the lie on it. All you see is, and they talk about it that usually when artists would draw it, they would usually draw with the Roman numerals or something like that. But this artist who drew it, I read an article. The guy actually tracked down the artist. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but he was some German guy, and he actually found the Hebrew lettering, decided to put the Hebrew lettering in, and asked him why the second one. Now the reason, this leads to the end of this drasha, is that, it's interesting that this artist picked the second luchas, because most people assume that there were 5 luchas on one and 5 luchas on the other. 5 dibros on one and 5 dibros on the other luchas. There are shittas that say that there were all 10 on each luchas. There were 2 luchas, but all 10 were on each luchas. And the reason is, what lawyers do sometimes, they give you an original and they keep an original. So that's the same thing, like this was part of the bris with Klal Yisrael. So Hashem says, I get a copy and you get a copy, because this is between us, so I'm going to keep a copy and you get a copy. But according to the other pshat, that there were 5 dibros on each, so our Messiah is that there were 5, the first 5 are Ben Adam L'Makom, between us and Hashem, and the second 5 were Ben Adam L'Chaverei. And Kibbut of Aim is on the first one, that's sort of like a link between Ben Adam L'Chaverei and L'Makom. But what some like to say is that the first 5 are religious, about Hashem and Avodah Zarah and Shabbos, and the next 5 are social and moral, and so the Ramban and a lot of Rishonim, they say it's the exact opposite. That the purpose is, the reason why the first 5 are Ben Adam L'Makom and the next 5 are Ben Adam L'Chaverei is to show you that even the ones that are Ben Adam L'Chaverei, they only come because of Ben Adam L'Makom. Meaning, I would humbly disagree with the Supreme Court's opinion. I would, in Texas at least, and I would stick with the one in Kentucky. The Aseret Dibros are a completely religious symbol. Even though it might be the basis for some civil law, and there might be historical precedent of societies to base it on the Aseret Dibros, but our Messiah is that even the ones that seem to be socially based are completely based on a Ben Adam L'Makom, meaning Hashem gave it to us, and therefore we do it. We don't lay sirtzach because we feel that that's the way we can get along as a society, and that's how we have to function. We don't kill because Hashem told us not to kill, and that's the purpose. That's the setup of the Aseret Dibros. Is that first you have the powerful ones putting down the framework that this is a religious, completely religious, not secular situation here, and then you could have the ones following it. So I would dissent on the Supreme Court opinion.
Very nice. Thank you.